in detail. Our American partners and us are worried over the situation. We presented our position, which is well known, regarding the things happening in Ukraine, the reasons for these events, and what should be done by the international community in order to help start inclusive national dialogue, in order to overcome the deep division in Ukrainian society, and constitutional reform with that we strongly believe should take into account the interests of all the parts of Ukraine. We also expressed our deep concern over the fact that necessary measures are not being taken to ensure law and order. Effective measures are not being taken to stop illegal activities by radicals who continue to stage provocations, including armed provocations, violent provocations, and they increasingly attempt to influence the processes taking place in Ukraine. We pointed out that quite obviously the provisions of the February 21st agreement are not being implemented, such as surrendering weapons and clearing barricades on the streets. And our U.S. partners assured us that they also think these matters need to be taken care of. They also agree with us that the constitutional reform that would help overcome the division in Ukrainian society is very important. At the same time, as regards practical steps that can be taken by Ukraine's foreign partners, we don't have a common vision of the situation. Our differences remain, but of course this conversation was helpful in order to understand better how well we understand each other in this situation, in the wide context of the different issues in Russia-US relations. And from this point of view, I would say this discussion was helpful. We also talked about Crimea, and we reiterated our position, which has been presented by the Russian president, that we will respect the choice that the people of Crimea will make in the referendum on March 15th. I am ready to take questions now. We'll have two questions from both sides. Do we have only two sides here? Okay, so international media are one side, and then Russian press is the other side. Okay. Interfax news agency. Does Russia agree to set up a contact group with the US and European countries to deploy a mission to Ukraine? You know, I've had a chance to comment on this issue. A contact group, in the way as it is offered by our Western partners at the moment, thinks that the goal should be to enhance direct dialogue between Ukraine and the Russian Federation. And we think this is a quid pro quo, because the Russian Federation was not the reason for this crisis. We have warned repeatedly our Western partners that they should not confront with this wrong choice, as they did when they prepared for this association agreement with the EU, when President Yanukovych announced his decision to postpone this procedure. You know how this entire process started and what we said, how we warned against encouraging anti-constitutional activities, especially relying on illegal paramilitary groups. So if the international community is responsible about the future of the Ukrainian nation, they should strongly encourage Ukraine to start the process of the constitutional reform. The Supreme Rider is well able to initiate such a process, inviting all the regions to the dialogue and making sure that they all take equal participation in this process. By the way, we have a proposal. We submitted it a week ago to our Western partners. Maybe later we can publish this proposal, our vision of how international support can be provided for this process. But the most important thing is we don't need an international structure to look at Russian-Ukrainian relations. These relations are still intact. Of course, after these events in Kiev, after the legitimate president in Kiev was ousted, we had certain difficulties, but the Russian President Putin instructed the Russian government to continue working with their colleagues in the current Ukrainian government, the Ministry of Economics, the Ministry of Energy, and contacts between our foreign ministers also continued. So all the current issues that our Ukrainian colleagues want to discuss, they can discuss with us directly. And actually, I would like to mention the fact that Ukraine suggested convening a CIS meeting. Ukraine is currently presiding over CIS meetings, and they suggested having this meeting in Kyiv in just a few days. We said that according to the CIS procedure, initially we need a meeting at the level of deputy foreign ministers, and it should take place in Minsk as the headquarters of the CIS, but Ukraine declined this proposal, so it's not like we dodge away from dialogue. And what the international community should do is it should encourage all Ukrainians to participate in this dialogue on the constitutional reform with the understanding that procrastination and encouraging the Ukrainian leadership to continue advancing in the direction they were advancing. This is what caused the Crimean leadership to hold a referendum, and we have promised to respect the outcome of this referendum.
Mr. Lavrov, Neil Buckley from the Financial Times. Are Russian military forces being made ready to enter eastern Ukraine? We've seen a significant build-up of their forces on the borders, and your ministry this morning made clear that it was ready to act to take citizens of eastern Ukraine under Russian protection in light of events in Donetsk last night.
What happened in Donetsk, we have already commented on that. Our foreign ministry has commented on that. This text should be available to you. And what happened is outrageous. Armed people, militants, arrived in Donetsk from other regions and attacked the participants of a peaceful rally demonstrating against Kiev authorities. The Russian Federation does not have any plans to invade eastern or southern Ukraine. We strongly believe that the right of Russian people, Hungarian people, Bulgarian people, and the Ukrainians themselves should be protected and secured. And the fact that we don't have any serious violations in Crimea at this point is because additional measures were taken and self-defense brigades were intent on preventing what happened on Maidan to happen in Crimea. Actually, there is still this tent camp on Maidan, on the Independence Square in the center of a European capital. And I can assure you that we have no plan not to be transparent in what we do. Let me give you an example. Just a few days ago, Ukraine, as part of the Open Sky Agreement, requested for an emergency flyover on Russian territory where we had our maneuvers, and immediately we agreed to this request, and it was granted. Mr. Lavrov, why do certain Western countries recognize the right to self-determination, like in Kosovo, and at the same time they don't grant the same right to the people of Crimea. What do your Western partners respond to this? Well, they say it should be dealt on a case-by-case basis. That's all they say, basically. Well, if Kosovo is a special case, then Crimea is also a special case. It's just equally special. Let's take two more questions.
Did Secretary Kerry raise the issue of sanctions? Did the Secretary threaten Russia with sanctions? And what is your view on the prospect of sanctions, maybe even trade sanctions against Russia?
State Secretary Kerry made no threats regarding Russia. As regards the prospect of sanctions, we live in... we know what Washington is considering, what Europe is considering. We have plenty of media reporting on that. And I can assure you that our partners realize that sanctions is a counterproductive instrument. And if this decision is made in Western capitals, this is the decision they make. But this will definitely not help our mutual interests, the interests of business, the interests of developing our cooperation. This is very obvious. You know, in politics it makes no sense to speculate. There are no ifs in politics. No what-ifs.
After Sunday's referendum, do you expect Crimea to become independent or to become part of the Russian Federation? And if so, Western partners have called this unacceptable annexation. As Russian Foreign Minister, aren't you concerned at the deep deterioration between Russia and the West this has led to for quite a long time?
As regards the referendum that will take place in Crimea this Sunday, President Putin has already said that we will respect the choice that the Ukrainian people, actually peoples, because there are several ethnic groups in Crimea, the choice that they will make. And once we have the results of this referendum, we will announce what we think about it. The Crimean parliament has already passed a declaration declaring the independence of Crimea and expressed their hope that the people of Crimea will confirm this decision at the referendum. It makes no point to speculate at this point because we just have to wait and see. Regarding what our Western partners said, that this referendum will not be recognized, like I said earlier, people are entitled to the right to self-determination. This is a provision in the UN Charter, and we have plenty of cases where people used this right to self-determination, including in modern history. Let me give you one example. Everybody talks about Kosovo. There is also another nation, Comoros Islands, and in last century they had a referendum on the matter of independence from France, and one of the islands was against that. And based on that, France insisted on a recount of votes to make sure that they don't count the entire number of the people, but they count votes on each island separately. And based on that, there is this island called Mayotte. This island is still part of France, first as a colony, as a colonial territory, and later it was included in the French Republic as part of some department. What was that, annexation or self-determination? I don't know. The UN and the African Union did not recognize this decision, but the European Union lives with it perfectly well. And finally, as regards the response by our Western partners, once again, it's their decision, it's up to them. The Russian president is in close contact with President Obama, with Chancellor Merkel, with Prime Minister Cameron, with President Hollande, with other leaders of Western countries, and not just Western countries, with the Chinese leader Xi Jinping, with the President of Turkey, Mr. Erdogan. And in my telephone conversations, in my regular meetings with my colleagues, I make no secret of our position. We're not hiding, we're not dodging their questions. What counts is that we have an honest and fair discussion of all these issues.
Do you think, Foreign Minister, that the last chance for a definitive political and diplomatic solution to this crisis has now been lost? Because there is an inevitability for the next few days. There will be the referendum on Sunday, and then on Monday, EU foreign ministers need to consider what they're describing as a series of serious measures against Russia. Has the last chance for diplomacy been lost?
I cannot answer this question. We never shirk from discussing things along diplomatic channels. If our partners are not willing to do that, we cannot force them. But I hope, and at least in our private, personal conversations, we see that they have this understanding, that they realize that this is truly a situation that cannot be considered in isolation, outside the context of history, and whether there are some precedents in history or not, and by the way, there are precedents. Everybody realizes, I can assure you, everybody realizes how important Crimea is to Russia, what Crimea means to Russians. It means much more than Comoros Islands for France or Falkland Islands for Great Britain. Thank you.